So one of the things that we did before we ended up that ended up turning to be a real big hit. It's the most watched segment in the history of this channel. So what we did was based on neutral site favorability as well as factoring in results that happened on the field, we ended up ranking all the conferences 1 through 10. So we ended up doing that yet again, but just specific to bowl season. Now, bowl season is technically not done yet, right? But even though bowl season is not technically done, bowl game has every team in the bowl season has played at least one bowl game. So with one bowl game to go, this list is pretty firm. So how do we go about ranking these conferences? So we ended up doing a non-bias point system. We gave teams points based on how they did in their respective bowl game. So I kind of have it posted up on screen. Hopefully, future me editing this does remember that. So if you win by 25 or more, blowout, that's 4 points. 17 through 24, that's free. 9 through 16, 2. An 8-point win or less, that's 1. If you lose by 8 or less, you don't get any points. And then if you lose by more than that, you lose points for your conference. I did also give teams a bonus if you ended up beating a ranked team in your bowl game. And you also get a bonus for your conference if you ended up winning a college football playoff game as well. So, all those rules aside, let's go ahead and jump into the not so final, but mostly final conference rankings that we do have for the 2023 bowl season. And everyone's records are very similar. Wasn't a conference that was overly egregious. There wasn't a conference that really dominated, but the way that these teams win their bowl games, that's what really separated these bowl teams at the end of the day. So, starting at the very bottom, got Conference USA. We have Conference USA in last. They had four of their 8 teams go to bowl season. And this was not a great bowl season for Conference USA, or at least this manufactured Conference USA. So they went 2-2, but their 2 wins, Jacksonville State, they barely beat Louisiana, who's going to have a losing record. Western Kentucky needed a miracle to beat Old Dominion. And then their 2 best teams that were represented in Conference USA Championship, New Mexico State and Liberty, well, they ended up being blown out. So Conference USA is at the very bottom. And then at 9, I got the ACC. The ACC, honestly, tremendously struggled in this bowl game. And what really hurt the ACC as a whole was, well, their best team in the conference, Florida State, they got demolished by Georgia. And yes, I know Florida State was not at full strength, but you got to play better than 63-3, man. That one physically hurt to watch. They weren't the only team to be blown out. North Carolina, they were blown out by West Virginia. Syracuse loses to South Florida. They get blanked 45-0. There were some bright moments too, like Duke beating Troy, Georgia Tech beating UCF. NC State was competitive with Kansas State. Boston College, shout out to the Eagles. They pulled the upset off against SMU. That's probably the best performance in the ACC, but just a tough year for the ACC conference as a whole. So they're at 9 for me. At 8 is the MAC. The MAC, solid year. Mine was competitive against Appalachian State. What hurt the MAC tremendously was, while they had one blowout, they had Eastern Michigan lose to South Alabama, not only get blown out, but then one of their players caused a fight after the game, and they didn't even win the brawl after the game either. Just Bad day. Bad day for Eastern Michigan for that bowl game. And while Ohio got a blowout against Georgia Southern, no one else really won convincingly. The bowl games that they did win, they were very close wins. You have Northern Illinois winning by a couple, but then you have like Toledo, Bowling Green, in Miami. They all also lost. So they end up going 2-4. But for the most part, with the exception of Eastern Michigan against South Alabama, they were competitive. But I do have them at 8 for that. Takes us up to number 7. Number 7, we do have the Mountain West. Now, the Mountain West started off relatively strong, actually. Fresno State, of course, blowing out New Mexico State. Air Force getting a big win against James Madison, who would have been ranked in this top 25 if they were actually allowed to compete in the college football playoff this year, if that was actually a thing, but they were on probation. That's a whole separate conversation. They did have some multiple losses, though. They did have Georgia State beat Utah State. San Jose State was upset by Coastal Carolina. And then UNLV gave it the old college try, but they did end up being pulled away from late. Kansas won by 13 there. So we got a couple of points there. So that's how they finished in 7th. 5th and 6th is going to be a little bit of a surprise, though. I have the American and the Big Ten tied for 5th place. Now, the Big Ten had also an average bowl record. And one thing about the Big Ten is that they could possibly jump up to 2nd if they can get a blowout. If Michigan can get a blowout against Washington, they can move up to 2nd as a conference. If they beat Washington by at least 17 points, they could move up to, I want to say 3rd. Not totally sure on that, on the numbers on that. But the Big Three of the Big Ten struggled outside of Michigan. Penn State was a favorite against Ole Miss, and they lost. We also have Ohio State, a favorite against Missouri. Well, they also lost as well. And then we also have the American Conference. The American Conference I have tied for 5th as well. The American was a solid year for the American Conference. We saw, of course, USF blowing out Syracuse. We also had, UTSA handle business against Marshall. Memphis beating Iowa State, another Power 5 team. It was a solid year overall for the American, and it was one of the better teams in bowl season. But then the Sun Belt happened. And of course, the Sun Belt we had to be pretty up high on. We have them 4th right now with 8 points total. And the Sun Belt got almost every team into a bowl game, all but just a couple. And while they end up finishing below 500, for the most part, there wasn't really too many games where Sun Belt teams were getting blown out of the water. And of course, you have like Georgia State, South Alabama, also, and Texas State too, garnering a ton of points for the Sun Belt as a whole. So that really helps the Sun Belt, and the fact that you had 12 of 14 teams as well. 3rd, I have the Big 12 with 9 total points in this scenario. Big 12 ended up doing pretty solid in this bowl season as well. Key wins include like Texas Tech beating Cal, Kansas beating UNLV, Oklahoma State beating Texas A&M. Oklahoma State was a very slight favorite. Oklahoma State got it done there. West Virginia win the Duke Mayo's Bowl. What else do we have? Kansas State. Kansas State, we were very high up on all year long. They beat NC State. And of course, you have Texas making it into the college football playoff, which leads to a team that's actually in the national championship game. Washington in that Pac-12 conference. Pac-12 was a conference that is going to be on its final stand, but Pac-12 overall doing very good. 11 total points. Depending on what Washington does, if they can blow out Michigan somehow, they could actually tie or even surpass the SEC this particular bowl season. It is kind of that close. Like the SEC is going to be at number 1, but Pac-12, they are right there. Multiple ranked wins. You got Oregon beating Liberty, Washington beating Texas in the college football playoff, Arizona beating Oklahoma, USC pulling an upset off against Louisville. I mean, it was an excellent bowl season for the Pac-12 from that standpoint. It could get even better if Washington can come out and actually win this national championship game against Michigan. It's going to be a tall task to do so. And of course, the SEC, we do have number one for now, but that is subject to change. Multiple rank wins for the SEC as well. Missouri beating Ohio State, Georgia beating Florida State, Ole Miss beating Penn State, LSU beating Wisconsin, Tennessee beating Iowa convincingly, like a drum as well. And even in the losses, the SEC was competitive in all of their games. Auburn's loss, the only exception being Auburn losing to Maryland, but their other losses, Texas A&M, that was a one-possession game. Kentucky went right down to the wire with a ranked Clemson squad too. So, and of course, Alabama barely losing to Michigan in the Rose Bowl. That went to overtime as well. So overall, really good year for the SEC. We have them at number one for now. That is, of course, going to be subject for change.